This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
Today on CityCast Houston, in a perfect world, every child in Houston would have an equal opportunity to be successful with their education and health. But for children of color in our city, the barriers to achieve greatness start with something as simple as the zip code they live in. That's why we're talking with Aswad Walker of The Defender about the child opportunity gap and what it truly means for the future of children in H-Town. And after today's interview, Christopher Larson, CEO of Downtown Houston Plus, will be joining us for a conversation about the ongoing evolution and expansion of Downtown Houston, sponsored by Downtown Houston Plus. So make sure you stick around. It's going to be great. It's Monday, May 13th. I'm Raheel Ramzanali, and here's what Houston's talking about. Aswad, welcome into CityCast Houston. How are you?
I'm just fine, man. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. Such an important topic to talk about. But I think before we jump into everything, it is important for our listeners to understand what exactly is the Child Opportunity Index and how is it measured? Because we always hear about the Child Opportunity Gap, but it's actually based on very important factors, right?
Yeah. So the Child Opportunity Index, they produce a child opportunity score, and they base it on three different domains, education being one, health and environment, number two, and the third is social and economic. And so they create a score from 1 to 100 based on their findings. And it's not some fly-by-night thing. You know, they compare data on all 73,000 census tracts in the United States. So, you know, they've covered the gamut to try to get this information. And what they found is not surprising to anyone at all. The typical white child lives in a neighborhood that has an opportunity score of 74 out of 100. For Black children, the typical Black child lives in the neighborhood of a score of 30. Hispanic children, the typical score is 33.
Wow. So beyond this score, I mean, this child opportunity score and index, it can predict a lot of outcomes for children, right? Like, what are some of the outcomes that they can predict?
So maybe one of the most surprising to some, I guess, would be the fact that if a child is in one of those opportunity zones where there is no opportunity or there's very little opportunity, they end up living 6 years less than a child in a zone with a higher score. And in some cases, the life expectancy gap is an entire decade. And so that's just one of those after effects of, living life without the same opportunities that other human beings have.
Okay, so tell me, how is this score from the Child Opportunity Index currently impacting our children?
In several ways. On the educational front, if you live in one of those areas that has less opportunity, that means you have less access to AP courses. You have less access to seasoned award-winning teachers. You have less access to up-to-date equipment and supplies. You have less access to all those things, and that can potentially hamper your educational opportunities, educational strivings, and those opportunities after high school. On the healthcare front, if you're in one of those areas, for example, Freedmanstown, which is literally in the shadow of downtown, you can almost touch downtown or the medical center if you're standing in Freedmanstown, yet Freedmanstown is one of those areas where the Black female mortality rate is highest in the country. And so even though we have, this award-winning Texas Medical Center, people come from all over the country to take advantage of, this cutting edge healthcare. We got Black people right here that can see it, that can walk to the medical center, but can't access that. So those are just some of the ways that it impacts us.
Is this impacting children in terms of their ability to go to college or get a master's degree as well? Because we've seen how important that is. And yeah, education is accounted into this, but is there any correlation between them getting to the next level in terms of college?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there's the wealth gap that folk talk about a lot, which this pours into directly, but that is impacted by the education gap. And what's amazing is the education gap just kind of feeds the narrative of all the negative stereotypes about Black people and people of color, but it really becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. I'm here talking about Mr. Stevenson's article, but I have done several articles about the fact that purposeful barriers have been placed. We talk about America being a meritocracy, where if you have the best work ethic, or you have the best grades, or et cetera, then you will achieve more. But history shows that America is not a meritocracy. It's really a mediocrity, because there have been example after example after example of institutional roadblocks put in place before Black people, people of color, women, so that there is not an equal playing field.
No, it's not. And we've always heard about it, right? That people of color are born 50 steps behind and have to basically catch up to be successful. And yeah, people will point out, but look at this story. Look at this person. He worked so hard and he made it. But when you kind of pull back a little bit and look at the greater picture of this, you go, okay, that's one example. What about the other 30,000 kids, right? Like, how can we catch them up? Is it frustrating to see that these numbers back up what we've known, or is it almost like we've known this the whole time, so why are we even putting these numbers out?
It's kind of both and. I'm the associate editor, so I have to edit everyone's articles. And so as I was editing Mr. Stevenson's article, the first thing that came to mind is, okay, so what? We know this, but this is information that does need to get out there. And so, it's heartbreaking to see in print, or to see the numbers behind the research behind what we already know, but we still need to know it. Yeah. Because at least if it's in our sights, if it's brought to our attention, prayerfully, we can muster up the courage and the moral fortitude to try to do something about it.
Houston had one of the top 10 worst opportunity gap scores. We had a score of 85. And again, as you mentioned, Aswad, it is looking at the best opportunity score. So let's say if somebody had 100 and looking at the worst, right? And ours was an 85-point gap. And it just shows how segregated our neighborhoods have become. Let's talk a little bit more about the Houston scores.
So they were horrendous. I was absolutely shocked. I mean, because I've been living in Houston most of my life. And so much of what I do is in the Third Ward. And as I'm driving through Third Ward, I've been affiliated with the iconic Shape Community Center, which is right there in Third Ward. My wife graduated from Texas Southern University. My children went to school, right in that general area. Two of my daughters matriculated at the University of Houston. One is a junior there. So Third Ward has a real place in my heart. But Third Ward is one of those areas that has one of the higher opportunity gaps. But the scores in terms of the highest opportunity gaps correlate with other things. We did articles dealing with the health opportunity gap, so to speak, where more disease and less insurance and less opportunities for, receiving the care that you need. It's the same numbers there. We did articles dealing with air pollution and environmental racism, and we see those same gaps. And so we're talking about Third Ward, Fifth Ward, Sunnyside, South Park, Acres Homes, the Fofo, all the same, Settegast, Pleasantville, all the usual suspects. And so on that level, I was kind of shocked that I was even shocked by Houston's number. because it's a horribly consistent pattern.
This episode is brought to you by Shopify. Do you have a point of sale system you can trust, or is it a real POS? You need Shopify for retail. From accepting payments to managing inventory, Shopify POS has everything you need to sell in person. Go to shopify.com/system, all lowercase, to take your retail business to the next level today. That's shopify.com/system.
As you mentioned, you're involved in the community. You are out there. You see what's happening. Why is this happening? Why is there such a huge opportunity gap for our Black and brown babies?
So I remember the former mayor of Houston, Sylvester Turner, bragging about the fact that Houston is the most diverse city in the United States. But then he followed that up by saying, but that means nothing if the opportunities are not as diverse as the demographics. And different writers for the Defender, we've done articles on one of the, what I would say are the reasons for that. So Harris County Commissioner 1, Rodney Ellis, he pushed to have studies done of different entities to see how they are allocating their opportunities in terms of business. Who are they doing business with? I mean, if Houston and Harris County is the most diverse in the nation, then those opportunities should be very, very diverse. But those studies showed that the Houston Ship Channel, the Port of Houston, barely did, I think, 0.5% business with, what do you call them, MWBEs, minority and women-owned businesses. And there were some entities that didn't even want to do the study at all. But Commissioner Ellis's point was, before we can even attack the problem, we kind of feel what's going on, but we have to, if we have the numbers, then we can say, okay, this is the problem. This is where we can deal with it. But then there's also those historic issues of racial zoning, racial covenants. There was a Houston community that I think just last year updated its racial covenants. Those racial covenants being homes in a certain neighborhood can only be sold to white people. And here we are in the 2020s, and racial covenants were still in existence. Redlining, I'm sure I'm speaking to the choir, I'm sure you know this, but redlining then says that a Black or Hispanic couple who wants to move wherever they want to move and where they can afford to move can't do so because they were restricted by, not by just racist realtors, but by local and state and federal government laws, that they could not move into certain neighborhoods, which then meant that if you buy a house in a red line neighborhood, one that was considered more high risk, then you pay more in taxes, you pay more for everything, and you get little investment in return. That means that you can't stack that wealth and pass that wealth on to the generations behind you.
With all that being said, the historical context of everything, what factors are playing here in the city of Houston, were there any recommendations from those who put together this Child Opportunity Index on how we could fix this, whether it be federally, state, local? How can we close this gap or make it even for everyone?
So, yeah, they did provide recommendations. So one was to reduce child poverty with the expansion of programs like the child tax credit. And for some, that may not seem like a lot, but when you have more funds coming in than planned, that means you have more options, because when the funds are few, people are making choices between, do I pay rent, or do I buy food, or do I buy medicine that we need, or do we do this, that, and the other? And so that's a big deal. Another solution was increase families' ability to access higher opportunity neighborhoods with zoning reform. That one, I think, is kind of tricky, because we're going to have to deal with a whole lot of that embedded racism to even push that one forward. But then third was to increase children's access to quality schools via school assignment reform. Another very, very tricky one, especially since, and this is just editorial comments coming from me, especially since we're seeing what almost looks like the purposeful destruction, underfunding, divestment in public schools, and this push to take those public dollars and give them into the hands of folk who already have money so that they can send their kids wherever they want to send them. So there's challenges. That's what I'm saying. But even with the solutions, there are big, big challenges. But, it's not going to change if we don't do anything.
With all your time and research into this and understanding the historical context of our city, you grew up here. Would you make any recommendations? How would you fix this?
The things that have worked in other places and the things that are working here are those solutions that come from, and I hate to say the bottom, but the bottom up, from the grassroots, from the community. When you see community organizations and individuals and civic clubs, etc., taking matters into their own hands, you see improvements in every facet of life. And I think we need to do that on steroids. One example is Shape Community Center, which I mentioned earlier. They have a Elders Institute of Wisdom where seniors come on a regular basis. But one of the things that the seniors do on a regular basis is they meet with the children of Shape's after school program so that they can pass down their wisdom and share their wisdom with these younger kids. And what has happened is, since they've done that, those children have shown dramatic improvements in every facet of school life: attendance, grades, behavior, all the things improved. And simply because one segment of the community was pouring into another segment of the community. And so you just see an improvement in multiple areas of life when communities come together themselves and they stop waiting on Superman or waiting on this, that, or the other to come save them.
Aswad, I know we're talking about it. I know y'all have covered this on The Defender and other outlets are slowly starting to talk about it. But it's so heartbreaking, right? And this is something that's always bothered me, is when you look at the map of Houston, a child that was born 10 feet to the left is placed in a situation in life where his outcome or her outcome won't be as good as the person who is 10 feet to the right. Why isn't this a bigger deal? And why aren't more Houstonians upset about this?
That's a great question. I wish I had the answer for that. All I know is, as you alluded to earlier, there are vastly different life outcomes just depending on your zip code. There's been so many studies that just talk about almost the curse of the zip code. Your zip code should not determine the way you are treated as a human being. However, these child opportunity zones speak to that whole thing about where you live, really kind of dictates those life opportunities or lack thereof. And so, there's this big thing in Fort Bend County right now where children who did not even attend specific schools were allowed to be the valedictorians of those schools. But, one of our reporters, Rashonda Tate, our managing editor, her article, I think, raised so much of a fuss that Fort Bend went and changed their policy on that. But one of the things that made that so egregious is because schools like Willow Ridge, that I absolutely love, but there are schools on the quote unquote wrong side of the tracks that don't have AP or advanced placement courses so that, your GPA can be elevated so that you can be that quote unquote top student. Healthcare access is tremendously lowered when you are in one of those lower opportunity zones. Your level of police interactions, and those interactions historically for Black and brown people have not been good, but the police interactions go up exponentially. And travel opportunities. And no one talks about this, but one of the most enlightening things for human beings is to just travel. But for children in these low opportunity zones, they are less likely to ever leave their city, ever leave their state, and definitely ever leave the country just to see how other people are living. There's so many studies that have shown that just traveling can open up the mind to opportunities and that can be life altering. And to not have that is a crime.
How can we, the citizens of this great city, do more to help close this gap or provide more opportunities? What can we do?
Raise our voice about what's going on. I applaud you and your crew for, even taking the time to spotlight this issue, because you never know who's hearing this and is going to be motivated to do something about it. So number one, just talking about it, reading about it, finding out more about it. But number two, if you have some access to opportunity and there are zones where children don't have those opportunities, go there. I literally just finished an article about there's a group called First in Texas. They're all about exposing young people to robotics and STEM. They do this annual First Robotics competition. It's an international competition. They bring in 60,000 people from 109 different countries. And the young lady that I was interviewing, her name is Jane Taylor. She said, it is not a diverse room, but it's her mission to make it so. And so she has an opportunity, she has venues, and so she has taken those opportunities to these various places where right now they don't exist on the same level. And so if there are folk out there that hear this and you have access to those opportunities, it's on us. It's on us to bring those opportunities to where they are needed the most.
Aswad, before I let you go, I have to ask you, tell me more about The Defender. And I grew up reading Ralph Cooper's work in The Defender, a great media member, a fantastic sports writer. I know he left The Defender in around 2018, but that's how I found out about it. But tell us more about The Defender.
Man, you're not even old enough to remember Ralph Cooper. What? Go ahead, young man.
I would see Ralph every day. So I started my career covering sports. So Ralph was kind enough to give me advice. He was always around at the Rockets games, Texans, Astros, and truly one of the best people in the world.
Yeah. And thank you for that shout out for Ralph Cooper. But just a word about The Defender. We're a 93-year-old Black newspaper. C.F. Richardson Sr. was the founder, and he was an activist extraordinaire, so much so that death threats, bombing, all the usual stuff happened to him. He passed the paper down to his son, and in 1981, I believe, is the year that Sinceria, nicknamed Sonny Messiah Giles, purchased the paper. She's still the publisher and the CEO. But the tagline that we've used for so many years is Houston's leading Black information source. We know that there is goodness and greatness in our communities that's just not covered. And so we say it's our job to do it, but also just any news story that's going on locally, statewide, or nationally, we feel it's our responsibility to tell it from the Black perspective. And so we really enjoy doing that. But we also, whatever article we're writing, we challenge ourselves to not just talk about the problem, but provide solutions. And then finally, I'll say this, we're a part of a national consortium collaboration of 10 national Black-owned publications. It's called Word in Black. Check it out at wordinblack.com. So we work with publishers and writers and editors from Atlanta and Seattle and Chicago, all over the country, sharing ideas, sharing stories. And it's just a really good example of how we can improve or strengthen our impact when we decide to work together.
Aswad, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
That was Aswad Walker, Associate Editor at The Defender. You can read more of his work and Gregory Stevenson's story about the child opportunity gap with the link in our show notes. And listeners, don't go anywhere. In just a second, we've got a segment sponsored by Downtown Houston Plus. Will Fulton is chatting with CEO Christopher Larson about the most dynamic and exciting neighborhood in our city, Downtown Houston.
Hey, I'm Will Fulton, Content Director for CityCast, here with Chris Larson, President and CEO of Downtown Houston Plus. Chris, what's going on? How are you today?
Oh, I'm doing great, Will. How are you?
I'm doing really well, and I am so excited to talk to you about downtown Houston. You know, I listen to CityCast every single day, so I know that downtown Houston is absolutely booming. The neighborhood comes up so much when we're making our guides and stuff like that. But in your mind, what makes downtown Houston such an appealing place to be right now?
I think it really starts with, access to great dining, entertainment, the arts, particularly with our theater district. Then, of course, professional sports. I mean, who doesn't love walking to an Astros game or being able to go see the Rockets or the Dash or the Dynamo in person? But a big reason is also just because of people who want a shorter commute. We've got about 150,000 people that work downtown. So, luxurious walk to work. It's a great place. It's connected to transit. It can have really a car light lifestyle.
I really love that because I am such a fan of walkable neighborhoods, not needing a car to get to my favorite restaurants or local businesses or even work. What makes downtown Houston so fun and comfortable for exploring on foot?
Our team really keeps downtown super clean. Then we've also just got these amazing parks and green space experiences, whether it's Discovery Green or whether it's the trails along the bayou. Working with Commissioner Ellis, we recently finished 44 murals throughout downtown Houston. So lots of opportunities for art to catch your eye, lots of interesting, unexpected moments. And that just really makes the experience as a pedestrian all the more interesting.
I love that. I'm so glad you mentioned the murals. It is like an open air art gallery. It is so enjoyable to walk through, to take pictures. It's amazing. All right, so I've heard of this downtown office conversion study you completed, looking at ways to turn obsolete office buildings into new residential towers. And there's a new one called Elevate that did just that. Can you talk a little bit more about this idea and concept overall?
The way that people are using office space is different than it was pre-pandemic. And so what we've been exploring is what it would take to help to convert some of that space into future uses. We've been converting buildings in downtown Houston, old office buildings from turn of the century into hotels. But now it's really the next chapter of really thinking about how we utilize our built space for the most productive possible way. So that's really what the feasibility study looked at. And now we're really looking at how do we facilitate more of these conversions to create more spaces for people.
What does Elevate look like? Like, what are the vibes there?
Elevate is a gorgeous, restoration of a 1960s era office tower. It has been transformed into a beautiful rental residential community.
That is so cool. It is like you are living in a piece of Houston history. I absolutely love that. All right, Chris, well, switching gears a little bit, we all know that housing costs right now are a little expensive all over the country. So I'm wondering if there are options for people with varying budgets in downtown Houston, or even for like students who are going to school in the area.
We've got over 600 units of income restricted affordable housing. So if you're only making, let's say, half of the average salary in Houston or 3/4, rent can be tiered according to what your income level is.
That's amazing. All right, so I want to close on something a little more fun. All right, picture this. You are taking me to downtown Houston for an afternoon or an evening of fun and honestly, hopefully food too, because I know there are great restaurants down there. There are a million options. It's going to be hard for you to choose, but where are you taking me? Where are you going to show off the best of downtown Houston?
Okay, so I'm a bit of a history buff, and I think I'd start us at the rooftop of the Post Houston, a beautiful public space, and it's just got the most amazing skyline views. Probably go downstairs then into the food hall at Post HTX. They've just got, an incredible level of international fare, which is really representative of the city of Houston. Then I'd probably say let's walk up to Allen's Landing. Let's see where it all started, where the Allen brothers came up the Buffalo Bayou and then sort of meander over to Market Square Park. And then I'd say we top it off across the street at La Carafe, the oldest bar in Houston, and maybe have a glass of white wine in the afternoon and really experience what Houston was like over 100 years ago. And I think that'd be a good way to experience downtown, at least the north side of our downtown.
That's amazing. We just wrote about La Carafe in our newsletter, Hey Houston. Are you a tour guide, by the way? Do you do tours? Because that was pretty good. I think you could do it.
Hey, I just love this downtown, and there's so many different ways to show it off to friends and family, and I think that's just a small example of the many kinds of adventures that you can have here.
Well, that's amazing. Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here. I loved hearing a little bit more about downtown Houston.
Thanks, Will.
Thanks for listening, everyone. Check out downtownhouston.org to find out more. We'll have a link in our show notes, and we will also have links to all the Downtown Houston Plus social accounts. Trust me, they are a great follow on Instagram. They're always posting really fun stuff. So go follow them. And you know what? Go visit downtown Houston today. Why not? Go take a walk, see some murals, have some fun. All right, bye.
That will do it for today. Thank you for listening, and I hope you learned something new. Hold on 1 second. Hold on, my dog is freaking out. Hold on. I don't know why he's freaking out. I'll be right back, guys. All right, sorry about that.